So here we are with another match in the STB1. We've ended up on mines, we're playing by ourselves, no platoon mates to back us up, and a cursory glance at the XVM readout might look pretty disheartening. Not least because the enemy have a lot of mediums, fast mediums played by decent players that are likely to get up the hill in a hurry. We do have two bat chats, however, and although our Leopard is not very good, and our T-54 is not brilliant either, we do have the force to actually take the hill if we push it. So at the start of the match, that's exactly what we resolved to do. Sorry if the replay is a bit jittery, it's misbehaving a little, but as you can see, our mediums and lights did actually make a coordinated push on the hill, and thankfully nobody stopped. Usually you always have one idiot teammate that just stops in front of the whole line and gets everybody killed. This match, everyone went up. Once you pass the point of no return, you do not stop. And the result was, we all got up here more or less intact. The Bulldogs lost a lot of health, but it's a Bulldog. That's going to happen. Myself, I only lost 356 health, which is not too bad in a tier 10 medium. It's not really something you need to worry about. And now we've got a really good position to fight from with only one arty. We don't have to worry too much about that. We do, however, have to worry about the April Fool's artillery bombardment, which you may have just seen in action. Essentially, giant suitcases dropping from the sky with rainbow-coloured trails that do damage that scales with tier. If you manage to direct hit a tier 10 with, I think it's like, it fires 3 shots per use, you had to get 10 kills, and then you would get the consumable, which was on the 7 key. Gives you arty camera to target it, can hit anywhere behind arty cover as if it wasn't there, and these 3 suitcases would fall from the sky, and if you managed to direct hit a tier 10 with them, you would have the potential to get up to 660 damage, I think it was for a tier 10, but you know, like 100 and something for lower tiers. So it scales with tier. It's not meant to take someone out of the match immediately, it's more of a comedy thing and a minor annoyance. It is worth noting, however, that it was a useful weapon if somebody was low on health, say, you know, had like 100 hit points or less, you could actually take them out of the match with it. And quite a few salty tears were cried because of that. Get a little careless and battleship out. It gives the bat a shot into my side there. He's looking for a shot on the 140, he's being a nuisance, but he gets away. The STB's aim bloom issues do come back to bite it sometimes. You can't react to long distance shots like that quite as well as the Soviet mediums can. However, what you certainly can do is whiz around with your excellent gun depression and good general mobility and just shit out shells at people with fantastic DPM, second only to the Object 430, and much better gun depression than the 430 has. The enemy team in this match more or less folded in half. Again, this goes to show that XVM isn't everything. Teams of statistically better players often will either win the game in 3 minutes or fold in half in 3 minutes. They tend to play more risky. They will go for high risk, high reward positions. You also have things like people trying to pad their W18, so they'll snipe from the back and basically be useless. Or people that have bought accounts, people that stat pad in low tiers, so on. So, you know, they may not even be actually as good as their stats make them appear. It also doesn't account for, if you have Win Chance turned on, which tank they're in or what tier tank they're in compared to the rest of their team. I've said it before, I'm not sure if I actually said it on any of my videos, but I say it regularly to my platoon mates. I would rather have a team of solid green than a team which is half purple, because just the consistency of decent players versus the hit and miss nature of the more, shall we say, the more competitive players, it makes it a lot more of a simple thing to win. For example, take a classic case, Garbad, not one of the best players on the server, he's certainly good, but he's, you know, like a middle-of-the-road Unicum. Garbad's main claim to fame was, of course, being a very prolific poster and eventually getting permabanned for his incredible shit posts, but he used to talk himself up a lot, of course, as a lot of people do when they get good at the game, and having actually seen him play, the way that Garbad tends to play is to go for really high-risk, high-reward positions and then just sit out and dump out damage, which is why he used to complain about Artie so much, because it would focus in on him, because he would be sitting in the open completely out of Artie cover, sitting perfectly still, cranking out shots. Or he'd be in a position which is incredibly easy to hit an Artie, because it gives you a very high reward if you can sit there and crank out shots, but it's also very high risk. You can see me do this all the time. I'll rush somewhere in my medium where I'm hopelessly overextended if my team don't support me, but that's because if I get in that position early in the game, it gives me a good chance to leverage that against the enemy. And again, if you look at a lot of players, some Unicums, some Blues, some Greens, people who pay more attention to the way the game tends to work, they will go for those positions, and if you've got a platoon especially, you can usually get away with it. Good example being the one-line rush on Ruinberg that Hardest and I used to do a lot in encounter games. That kind of thing really pays off if you can make it work, but if you can't make it work, your team's going to die very quickly, and that's one of the reasons that these teams tend to fall apart, even though they look good on paper. As I said, another one is people just playing for themselves. They're out for their own stats, they're not out for a win. And again, I bring to light the example of the Chai E50, who got 6,060 damage sniping from the Abbey on the map of the same name, oddly enough, but contributed directly to our team's loss by just not firing his gun until the game was already over. So there's that to watch out for. Honestly, consistency is a lot more important, I think, in Chance to Win than individual skill, because unfortunately on the NA server in particular, with individual skill tends to come individualism, and people just forget that they're part of a team and they have a team objective. There's very little willingness on the NA server to subordinate oneself to the team. Very, very little. Everyone's just playing for themselves. And in many cases, they actively fuck over their teammates just to get a better result for themselves, even if it may cause the team to lose. Now, I've heard the Chinese server is a magical land of milk and honey where this is not the case at all, and the opposite's true, but I've never actually played it, so I can't confirm that. However, I will say if it's even close to true, I'd love to play there sometime. The Russians, I can only comment on what I've seen on Test, and I've heard from Russian server players that Test and the actual live server are very different, because on Test people don't care about losing credits or spending gold or any of that shit. They can just do whatever they want and get away with it. But I will say that the actual matches on the Test server tend to play a lot more aggressively than the NA live server does. And people tend to just be happy to cruise straight into the middle of a map and have a massive brawl, which is a lot of fun, but it doesn't really lend itself to any master strategy. Anyway, having got all the highfalutin technical shit about map reading and positioning out of the way, I would just like to say that the STB is an absolutely fantastic vehicle. If you don't have one already, you really need to get it. The line leading up to it is a bit hit or miss. As I've said before, the only tanks in that line I really liked were the Tier 3 light tank, the Tier 4 light tank, the Tier 7 medium tank, the Cheery, just because it was odd, not because it was good. The Tier 3 and 4 light tanks are excellent, some of the best light tanks in the game, I think. And then the STB itself. The STA-1 is just a shittier Pershing, I think, and the Type 61 is just a really shittier Centurion. It's kind of like halfway between the Centurion and the Patton. It's shitty. Doesn't have armor, huge target. It might have really good DPM, but it needs to actually hit something first, which is something it has a lot of trouble with. I know that there are people who will disagree and will say that those are good tanks. I'm sure they're fine. I just personally don't think they're very good from seeing people play them and from playing them on Test, which is why I skipped them to get the STB. At some point, I probably will go back and get them because got to catch them all, but they're not on the priority list at all, so that's probably not going to happen for a very, very, very long time. Maybe if I get a chance to get some decent matches on test, I'll try them out, post up my opinions, but just from what I've seen and played so far, I didn't enjoy them very much, and I find them to be very easy opponents to fight against because they're just not strong enough, in my opinion, compared to their tier mates, their peers. Anyway, I'd like to thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. There's plenty more where that's come from. I've actually made myself up another backlog. I can't seem to help it. So until the next one, I'd like to wish you the best of luck in the field, and I'll see you next time.